Hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. I regularly forget the North Carolina A&T State University Day on HBCU Walking Billboard. The date this year for us was the 24th, I think, and I forgot again. But here I am, Aggie Pride, sharing with y'all that I am a proud North Carolina A&T State University Aggie graduating class of 1998. Yay. And this is the last Friday of Black History Month. And I think it's important that I saw something this week that was there was uh, some of my white comrades asking about why do we have historically Black colleges and universities, and saying things like we don't have historically white colleges and universities. Um, Yeah. So in 1891, it was not legal by law, for Black people to go to colleges. And so we ended up with land grant colleges specifically for Black people. And North Carolina A&T was one of them. And so we still have them today, just as we still have higher institutions of higher ed that are almost all um, white. So important to know, because history is important to know. I'm very grateful. Last Saturday, I had an opportunity to be the keynote speaker for the Black Archives here in Kansas City. I think the work that they do is important because we don't always keep the history of every United States citizen and the people who are within certain cultures. And I think that's important today. I'm going to try to tie this thing down because I was in a conversation last night and I was just sharing. I got a new hobby, and in my new hobby, I needed some equipment. Well, when I was ready to buy the equipment, the person who sold the equipment wasn't there, but the equipment was there. I was going to pay for it. So I went ahead and got it and used it for my hobby because I needed it. And I was telling a friend that I learned that from my white girlfriend, Lisa. And she had a quizzical look on her face. And I was like, well, Lisa would be in the store using stuff, eating stuff. If she was hungry, she was going to eat it in the store. And what I thought was fascinating about that is that I was scared to eat it in the store. And in general, that's a cultural norm, cultural normative difference between us. And this person was like, well, I would do that too. And I think what she was trying to say was not all white people will use stuff that they have not purchased. And I think sometimes that this is a problem when we won't acknowledge cultural norms. The exception proves the rule. And this Black History Month is a month about race, right? It's not a month about wealth. It's not a month about education. It's a month about race. And I think that sometimes where we get stuck is that we will bring up the fringe cases or the exceptions when we're talking about institutional or systemic or I'll just say common things. And why I think this is important is because when you're talking about people being treated poorly for all types of difference except for race, it starts with us having an idea in our mind. I like to use this example of being extroverted versus introverted. If you don't know, it is to your benefit to be extroverted. Folks value extroversion. And so, and sometimes in my classes, I'll ask the introverts to tell me, how did you learn when you were young that extroversion was better? And people have to think about it, but then they'll say things like, well, my parents actually told me not to be shy. I was actually forced to go have friends, and that meant a specific thing, like lots of people. It couldn't just be the one person who was my neighbor or something. That the person who blurted out the answer was considered to be the smarter one. The people who got to be the lead in the play, or the person who got some other part, would generally be the more extroverted student. And sometimes even thinking folks are smarter. And I only know one billionaire personally. And he told me that his parents actually told him that he needed to stop. He needed to talk more, needed to have more friends, needed to be more expressive in his face, or else he wasn't going to be successful. And none of those things were true. And so when you think about if a couple of extroverts get together and start a business, what kind of things are we going to look for in our sales department? We're going to look for people who we think are outgoing and go-getters and talkative and collaborative and energetic. And we have an idea of what we think that means. But half of US citizens have preferences for extroversion, which means the other half have preferences for introversion. Now, why do I tell you that? Because if you're trying to sell something, you need to match the communication style of the person you're trying to sell it to. So when I think about like car salesmen, there are people who just don't want you talking to them. If I'm going to go buy a pair of pants, there are people who just don't want you talking to them. They just, if they need you, they'll come and ask you. And so if you get all salespeople who are more extroverted and more energetic, then you're going to miss out on some sales. But the challenge with having a sales team that is mostly extroverted is that when someone has more introverted tendencies, you're going to be like, they don't have enough energy. I don't know if they got it. I don't know if they can do it. When actually they are completely capable and will bring in a different kind of buyer. Why do I bring that up? Things like discrimination or leaving people out. Some of y'all get all triggered by the word discrimination. Leaving people out based on all types of difference, except for race, happen in that way. You know, I got an internal bias. It came to me from teachers, parents, television, all kinds of places. I take that bias, I get together with another couple people, and then we create policies and practices around it. But race, this here Black History Month, you should know, is different. And I like to bring it up during Black History Month because it is one of the specific times that is overtly focused on race. And so when you think about how race became an issue, it's not that before the 1680s, we didn't notice that people had different skin tones or different hair types. We noticed, but we didn't separate those people by law until the 17th century. And when we started to separate people by law, we started saying things like, oh, if you've got a certain ethnicity, you get certain privileges. And if you don't have that ethnicity, you don't get those privileges. And so then a century later, you got people that have by law have gotten certain privileges, and then they start to discriminate the privileges that they got by law. See, it happened in the reverse. All other difference is internal prejudice. Now I'm going to get together with some other people, create policy. Race was policy driven, law driven. Then people started to have all of these beliefs. And now centuries later, we have all these internal biases that make absolutely no sense because race is just a complete biological construct. It doesn't make any sense when you try to like break it down to the biological level. But from a systems level, there's not a single institution in the United States of America that doesn't have disproportionality based on race, not one. And so what does that look like when I can't even get a person to recognize that there are some cultural norms around race that are real? Are there exceptions? Yeah. Why do Black people hold their children close to them in public and not want them? Why would I not eat things in the store before I paid for them? Look, I got too many examples of Black folks doing something for less and not making it out. And so then over time, those cultural norms start to happen where folks have, you know, internalized fears, don't even really think about it, but just like, I ain't no way I'm going to eat something that I have not bought or use something that I have not purchased yet, because I don't want no smoke from whoever might be able to enforce this situation. And so what that makes me think about is when I tell the flea story, you know, fleas are in a glass, they all jump out. If fleas are in a glass, you put a lid on that glass, they jump up, hit their bodies against that lid till they realize it hurts, and then they will start to jump just below the lid. Once you have 100% of the fleas jumping just below the lid, you can take the lid off and the fleas will never jump out of the glass. You can break the glass, the fleas will never jump out of the glass. When I tell that story, if you watch that experiment on YouTube, which you can, there are fleas jumping out of the shape of the glass. You know, you'll see about, I don't know, let's say there are hundreds of fleas in the shape of the glass. You'll see a dozen jumping out of the shape of the glass. There are always exceptions to the rule. That's why it never makes sense for somebody to be like, you telling somebody about the general plight of Black Americans, and then they go, well, my cousin, or I know a person, or my neighbor, or Oprah Winfrey, it's like, yeah, the exception proves the rule. The exception proves the rule. But when we want to talk about the things that we know are that where we should be thinking about exceptions, we don't like to. You see, when we want to talk about exceptions around, I was at a meeting this week, and they were talking about understanding the Black impact of just institutional harm that's been created in my city. And every single example folks brought up was one of poverty, as if every single Black person is poor. And so in that instance, we can't manage to see that there's the same amount of difference within the within Black people as there is in all other groups of people. So we want to pick and choose. We are inconsistent. We are hypocritical in the way that we want to handle these things. And what I want to tell you, when folks say that they don't want to be political, and this is the last point I'm going to make, when you understand that racism is created by law and it's the easiest lever to pull, the last 15 months, if they haven't shown you anything, they should have shown you that. Whatever progress around voting legislation, whatever progress around healthcare, whatever progress around even celebrations like Black History Month and Juneteenth, and the African American Museum in DC, that by law, folks are just like, write those out. And so I think this idea that laws are really hard to change, I don't want to be involved in the political, the topics of politics. That's an idea. I'm not judging it. And I think you should know that the way that racism stays in place is law. If you read, you should read The Color of Law. If you don't read, watch a YouTube video on The Color of Law. Every single institution, there ain't a single institution that's not impacted by some policy, some practice. Where I live, how my city became to be Kansas City, even though it's in the Northland, and there's a Gladstone and Plattwoods and all these other cities between it, and Kansas City south of the river. How did that become true? Racist policy. How can you have most of the violent crime in a city targeted to a 4-block area? Well, by law, you ain't got no grocery stores there. You got loan sharks there. You got interesting planning and zoning that you allow to happen. Schools closed, all kinds of things. How people police is different. And so when you layer on these things, then of course violent crime there would be higher. And so if you don't hear anything else I say, know this, that I'm going to say broadly, hatefulness is winning, because hatefulness understands that the Constitution is written in, they say 12th grade level, but I would say college level. Most newspapers are written at a level that is above what most or the average U.S. citizen read. The Bible, even, which is the book for which people highlight and say, they're using that to make their decisions about who belongs and who doesn't. When you realize that people can't read these things they're citing, I'm not judging it. I'm just saying we got to find a different way, because hatefulness knows to speak in talking points and dog whistles. What's the opposite of that? Like, how do you bring people along in a positive way in talking points? And what's the opposite of a dog whistle? I don't even know what the opposite of a dog whistle is. But why I love February. I love February because of Valentine's Day too. I'm a hopeless romantic. But I love February because every February, although I am Black 365 days of the year, even I learn something new in Black History Month because people are sharing. And why is it that we have Black History Month? Because by policy, What are we doing? Banning books by Black authors today. That's not even historical. We're doing that today. Why does it matter that I'm learning new things? Well, because by policy, certain things couldn't be in the curriculum even when I was in high school, right? Like certain things were not in the curriculum. I learned them in college. Why does it matter? Because when you think about most preachers, I was having a conversation Sunday. Folks were like, you don't need to have any kind of education to be a preacher. You do not. You do not. But the King James Version of the Bible is written in college level language. The NIV is written in 7th grade language. But all these different translations, and if you don't understand the historical context, you might cause some harm to some folk. And I think you should know that. And so on this last day of Black History Month, just what I want to offer up to you is if you are a person who believes that we are stronger together and that this here nation of ours is worth preserving, and you have taken a position that you just want to sit this thing out, I just invite you to reconsider, because all things race related have been put in place by law. And then now we have bigotry and hatred and prejudice based on it, but it started based on law. And I ain't running for public office, so I ain't telling you to run for public office, but connect with somebody who can or help you to understand the issues plainly. You know, we've got one thing that's on the docket right now for us here in Kansas City is the Violence Prevention Fund. It's $30 million. The $30 million is supposed to be spent in $6 million increments over 5 years. That Violence Prevention Fund is specifically designed to address the social determinants of violence. There are 2 ways you can attack violence and create safe cities. One way is to police your way out of it. But what I ask you to look at is that when you are in a safe city, and imagine you don't even see any of the people, the last thing you see is a whole bunch of police everywhere. Listen, I support the police. When I have an issue, I want the police to come. And safe cities are not created just by having police everywhere. And if you pay attention, you know that. And so I think it's kind of odd that right after Mayor Pro Tem Brandon Parkshaw goes to bat for the Violence Prevention Fund, that then there's a headline in the newspaper that says that she's being investigated by FBI. And, you know, good journalism makes the headline about the article. But when you start to read the article, you learn that, oh, it's just a source that said. When you read the article, you learn the mayor don't know nothing about it. When you read the article, you know that the city manager ain't know nothing about it. And then she herself says, no federal agency has reached out to me about anything. And so it just makes you wonder about the timing. And what's that got to do with empathy and Black History Month? You know, the last 3 mayors we've had, or if we get another Black one, the next one, that'll be 3 mayors Black. And if you understand the history of race and racism, you know, folk ain't trying to have that. So let me get off here before I say something get me in trouble. What I'm trying to do is, for those of you who don't like to read articles, to tell you that sometimes the headline ain't it. And for those of us who like to try to change people's minds, we got to figure out what's the opposite of a dog whistle. Is it still a dog whistle if we're using it for good? I don't know. Because if it is, we got to figure out how to have some dog whistles to help us move some things forward. Okay. All right. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got plenty work to do.